What's up, makers and wastelanders? Really excited to walk through with y'all how to build something Fallout inspired that is pretty darn cool. One of the most awesome things about Fallout is the attention to detail with the weathering. Everything looks old and rusted, and it's been sitting in a wasteland or a pile of mud for ages and ages. All of the items have a story. They have personality. And we're going to take that and we're going to apply it to some 3D prints. Check this out. So this right here is 3D modeled in Fusion, and it's controlled by a RGB LED controller. And then inside of it, we've got a bunch of LEDs behind each of the letters. And with the LED controller, you can essentially create any number of different patterns that are built in to have them display on the LEDs. So let's open up the face here so you can see what's inside. So here you can see we've got 5 strands of LEDs and they're animating right now. And in the bottom, you can see that there's an LED controller. Also, I'm sure you've noticed that this one has already had a bit of weathering done to it. To get it in frame here, you can see that there is a good amount of kind of rust and dirt, and it kind of looks oily. And this one's nice, but we're gonna do it even better, using some really cool paints to make it literally look like aged rust with texture and everything. So let's dive right in. All right, I wanted to show you how this was constructed. So here we are inside of Fusion 360, and you can see the body on the canvas here. Where I started is I basically created an SVG and then brought that SVG into Fusion 360. I'm not going to go through all of the details on how that's done. There's plenty of videos out there. Basically, an SVG is a vector-based graphic that contains outline data that you can bring into Fusion 360 and create extrusions. So if I go here and I show you the initial sketch, you can see the Fallout logo here. Now also, you'll see a lot of these numbers and might be wondering what those are. Those are all offsets that I've added in here because these pieces all need to fit within each other, and there's recesses and clear spaces and cavities and so on and so forth. So though this might look like a simple model on the surface, it actually takes a lot of precision in order to execute it. And if I turn on my analysis here and we slice the model down the middle, you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here with the different layers. We have an outer frame, and then we have a clear layer, which is, let me turn off all of these, and you know what, we'll turn analysis off so you can see this. Here's the clear layer. This is what is going to allow the light to transmit through the edges. The reason why there's a big space on the back of it is so that we can glue it to the insert, which you can see here is going to fit on top of it. Then we've got all our faces, and all of our faces sit on top of the other elements, and they will glue using a little bit of contact adhesive to the clear layer. So let me turn all these back on so you can see what's going on here. And then our bolt over here it's a couple different pieces. If I turn off all of the other stuff here, we can just focus on the faces and the bolt. You'll notice that the bolt is a yellow piece, and then it also has the little black parts that are going to glue on top of the bolt to create that effect. Also, again, I forget typographic anatomy, but with letters that have I don't know if it's called a bowl or a negative or whatever, you'll notice that I have this separate piece for the A. And that piece right there that I just removed will print separately, and then we will glue the little insert for the A inside of it, and then we will glue that clear layer to the A so that we can get our little negative space there. All right. So let's go out into the garage and start putting this thing together. All right, so here we've got all the parts for our Fallout sign, and we've got the frame, we've got the face insert, we've got the clear layer, this is the A, we've got all of our face insert pieces, and then we have the lightning bolt. All right, so this I have already primed, and because the technique that I'm going to use is going to make it very rough, which I'm sure you're looking at this, and I will talk about that in a second, I'm not going to sand it, but this stuff is amazing. Filler primer, it's phenomenal for 3D prints. It allows you to have minimal processing. So if we take a look at this finished one over here, and this one was a different technique that I'm going to show right now. This one was weathered using a spray can to get some of the spatters where you hold the can upside down and far away. And then we used water mixable oil paints to get this kind of organic, oily, rustic looking texture on it. But it's very smooth on the exterior. You can't see a whole lot of layer lines. If you look really close and I get it in the right light, you can. So all I did to this was filler primer, and I sanded it with around 400 grit sandpaper, and that's it. I didn't go through multiple layers. Now, if this was going to be gloss black, you'd probably see the layer lines. There is always a level of sanding that implies the finish that you're after, and I'm not going to make this gloss black. I'm not going to invest the time in trying to make it absolutely smooth. And this one, even less. And the reason is, we're going to use some really cool stuff here that gets this just amazing rust effect. And I think you'll be blown away at how well this stuff works. And for this, I will have a link in the description below. Punish Props has an amazing tutorial on this style of weathering. But for this walkthrough, we're going to be doing a different technique. And then we have our insert. Okay, so let's start assembling some of these parts and pieces, but before we do that, we're going to weather this so that it matches our faceplate. All right, this is the stuff. This is magic. It's made by a company called Modern Masters, and it comes in three parts. You have a primer, you have this oxidizing paint, and then you have this rust activator that you can spray on, or you can use an airbrush to apply it. So first what we're going to do about 2, maybe 3 coats of the primer. All right, so we've got did about 3 layers, so we've got some pretty thick coverage here. All right, my GoPro officially died. This is the stuff we're going to put on now. We're going to do about 2, maybe 3 coats, and then we get to do the fun part, which is we spray it with the solution and we let it sit. Probably gonna have to let it sit overnight. Sometimes it takes effect within hours, and then other times I've used it and it takes some time. All right, so we've done 2 coats. I'm gonna call that good. It's thick enough. So now it's the fun part. We're gonna spray it with the, no, sorry, this is the clear coat, the rust activator. And I have it in a little spray bottle, and I'm just gonna go around and kind of spritz it. You can do this more than one time, depending on the effect that you're going for. So for example, this one, I did it 1 round upright so that I got a lot of accumulation down here on that bottom edge so that it, looked a little more believable. Like if this sign was sitting up and it hit, a bunch of rain had hit it, more rust would probably accumulate down towards the bottom. But this one, I'm probably just gonna kind of sit it up like this and do the same thing with spray across the top and the sides. All right, so we let this sit I let it sit overnight, and then it still didn't look that great, so I sprayed it a few more times, let it sit for another I think 5 hours actually, and it looks pretty cool. I like how we got some of the really serious stains on the bottom where it kind of like dripped around and accumulated. The other thing I did is I just painted the back black, and I use this stuff. I think it's called like Black 3.0. Stuff actually smells really good. You can just Google it, Amazon it. It's acrylic paint, and it's super matte. The one downside with it is it can kind of like rub. Apologies, I accidentally had my camera on time lapse. So what we're gonna do next is just glue the faceplate to the clear layer, and you'll see all I'm doing is running a bead of CA glue around the top of the clear layer, and then slowly and carefully pressing the face into the clear layer. Faceplate, clear insert is attached. I had to go around my edge here and do a little trimming because my printer kind of goofed. You can see this edge is a little rough, and I need to make sure there's enough tolerance there. I still got to trim a little so that it will fit into the recess of the face. Anyways, we can continue on. Okay, the letters. If you look at the letters, you should have printed them face down, hopefully. The back side, you can see, is creatively got a tolerance here. There's a little edge, and that's so that it makes it easier to place them pretty perfectly on the clear layer. So we're going to start installing these bad boys. And again, I'm just going to use some CA glue, and I'm going to run a very slight bead around each letter. All we have left is the A, and there's this little insert that goes inside this clear container, and then we're going to glue that to the back of the A. And the way I do this is a little handy dandy aesthetic here, or prosthetic I mean, some tweezers. Okay, the orientation for this thing doesn't really matter. You just have to make sure that, you know, you look and you see like, okay, that tail, there you go. So let's throw some glue down in there, and as you've noticed on my CA glue, I have an extension. This helps so much. I also have bought some of these on Amazon and filled them up with super glue, and these tips, you know, they don't last super long, but I replace them, and this gives you a way to distribute the super glue through a really precise nozzle. So in this case, that can help because we can just put a dab right down in there. And now we're going to grab our tweezers. We're going to place it right in there and then push it down. Cool. There we go. All right. Last but not least, because my face is painted, I'm going to put a towel down. And we're going to put it face down, and our A, negative, or I can't remember, typographic terms. This is a counter something, I can't remember. Somebody who is a typographic connoisseur will probably be able to correct me on that. But anyways, we're going to glue this in. You can see there's another cutout on the A here. Right in there, there's a ridge, so it's going to make it easier for us to place in there. So we're just going to put a little bit of super glue around the edge of this guy, and then we're going to just plop it in there. I'm going to use my tweezers again, and I got to make sure I've got the orientation right. Okay, I'm going to give it a little wiggle to make sure I'm in the cavity. Yes, I am. There we go. So now if we put our face in here and test it, look at that. That is pretty cool. The next part is lighting it. So there's a couple things that you're going to need to light it. One, you're going to need a power source. Two, you're going to need a cable. and then 3, you're going to need some LEDs. And then as an optional, if you're going to use addressable LEDs, you're going to want a controller. So for a cord, I love using just your standard USB cable, and the reason is most of us have a number of USB power blocks floating around the house, and some of us even have USB outlets, which means you can take one of these that you've got lying around somewhere and use that as your power source. That makes it easy. Okay, with the cord, you can get these on Amazon, and again, you might have one of these lying around. It seems like everything we buy these days comes with one of these cords of some flavor. So what we're going to do is we're just going to snip off this end, and we're going to use that to wire into our LEDs. Okay, for the LEDs, you could do a whole bunch of things here. You could use warm white, cool white, or you could use, you know, color LEDs. You know, you can get them on Amazon and they glow red, green, blue, etc. Or you could go even farther and use addressable LEDs. And that's what these are. The difference between addressable LEDs and just your standard RGB colored LEDs, that these can have animations. And each one of these SMDs on this strip can be its own color. So these are really fun because you get a really cool effect when you pair it with a controller that is pre-programmed with certain animations. So that's what I'm going to use. Then this also gets into how you lay out the LEDs inside of your light. A bunch of ways you could do it. An easy way to do this would be to just run it around the perimeter of the inside like so. And you're going to get some great effects. Again, I'm, speaking because I'm using addressable LEDs, you're going to still get some good effects, but the effects will be running obviously around the edge. The harder way, which results in a much better effect, is to light each individual letter across. So that is what I'm going to do. You don't have to do that, but the results that I have found are worth it. Additionally, you're also going to have to use, if you're doing the method that I'm doing, which is going to be lighting each individual strips, is a diffuser. Now, the back of this is a pretty good distance away from the back of the box, but I have found that even still, these things are so bright that when they're behind it, they can make hot spots. So I use a diffuser for that. Here we go. This stuff's great. It's just packing foam, and when I get packages, I just tend to keep this stuff because it works amazing for diffusion. All right, so let's start making our power connector. So the first thing I'm going to do is just, well, there went that. Snip that off and peel back some of the wires, which I am going to use a stripper here, because inside of these, this one, this power cord also has a data line in it, so it's going to have, I believe, more than just 2 wires. It's also got shielding. Every time I open these, it's always surprising to see what we find. All right. Almost all of the time, black and red are going to be the wires that we want, and this is the data wires. So I'm just going to try and clean up some of this. And what we can do is plug it in just to be sure and test. I'm going to strip this back just a little bit more. I'm just going to strip with my fancy wire strippers here. Okay, I'm gonna plug this in. Right. Yes, we get 5 volts. Great. Okay. All right, now the controllers. I didn't really mention this earlier. There's 2 controllers that I've used before. I'll put the links to both of these in the description below. This, I'm not doing a good job of describing this. I just keep saying this. Okay. This is an RF remote controller, and this little module plugs into your LEDs, and this goes to your power supply, and when it gets power you can then control it with this RFID remote. These are really cool. They've got a bunch of built-in patterns. They work great. There's really nothing wrong with them. The only downside to these is if you've got a bunch of devices in your house, this controller will control them all because they all tend to operate on the same RF frequencies. Supposedly there's a way to make this remote only control this module, but I've got them all over my house. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So I found another solution, which is kind of cool. It's called a VIP Moon SP110E. What? Yeah. Anyways. These things are really cool because it uses an app on your phone, and that lets you control the lights. So I shall demo. Plug in to the power supply, and this controller can go all the way up to 24 volts, 5 volt to 24, which is pretty cool. These are 5 volt LEDs. As I mentioned before, these are addressable, so let's plug it in. It's going to light up, and I think it's just doing its default pattern right now. And what I will show you is, let's go into, you're going to download this app called LED Hue. They actually put this QR code on here, and you just scan that and it will take you to the App Store. The app's not that great, but it works. And you got to find it. There it is. Connecting. You got to enter the number of pixels and the color order. Mine is green, red, blue. An easy way to test that is you just go into what happened here? A thing to note about addressable LEDs: if one gets fried or you put the wrong voltage into the strand, it will only fry the one that's first to receive the power, which is a good and a bad thing. So what happened was, and I don't know what I did, I think that I had grounded the first LED, so it toasted it, and that's why the whole strand stopped working. So let's go back into the app here. I was just previously showing you, how this works. We can go to a solid color. Oops, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me go back here. You got to reconnect to it. Like I said, the app here is not the most intuitive in the world. Okay, so there you can see we're changing to green to blue. So that's how you would determine with this specific app, if yours is in the correct order. You can see here I've got GRB is the order that I've got set up for mine. And if yours is not in the right order, you can change that. But when I hit red, it's changing to red, green is green, that's all correct. Okay, then what you can do, again, not super intuitive, if you press the left arrow, you check this out. You got all these animations. So now you can see in the background we've got a rainbow animation running, and if I press the right and left button here on this little wheel, it'll just start flying through all these really cool different animation sequences. And you can favorite them. These little pink ones are ones that I have favorited previously. And it's really funny that this thing looks like some sort of like progress counter or some sort of indication of, I don't know. It's the design here is really interesting, but it works. It's just, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. But anyways, you get the point. I have another one of these in the house, and I'd have to turn them both on and see how do I wonder if I can control them individually, or if it lets me, or if it doesn't let me control them individually. Right, so there is one of these modules inside of this thing. And I haven't tried this yet, but I want to see if we can control how this works with both of them. Okay, so here we go. We can see one there and one here. The funny thing is, you can't rename them. So I don't know which one's which, but let's go into this one. Okay, and I'm gonna make a change. All right, so that is this strip right here. Now, if I want to change the sign, you gotta click on the same number, name, whatever you want to call it. Go in there, and then, yeah. So you can control them individually, which is nice. Now, I don't know if you can sync them. Doesn't appear so. I'm gonna modify this housing a bit because I want mine to be like mega clean. Let's try this out. Let's plug in our LED strip, and there we go. Now this is another thing. You could leave this connector and you could do something like this. I'm gonna cut it. All right, so you can see I clipped off the connector. You might be wondering why this green wire is snipped. This controller supports many types of LED strips. You'll notice this one has a positive, a negative, and a signal. It has 3 contacts. Some LED strips have 4. It's a different type. We're not using that, which is why I just snipped it off. And I'm just starting to create the chain of LEDs. So it's going to end up going like this, where it's going to kind of go in a sequence, you know, up, down, up, down, up, down, all the way towards the end. And all I'm doing is just soldering the contacts and creating this chain. And I'm going to continue doing that. And then we're going to stick them on here. And I'm going to use some hot glue to tack them in place, because sometimes these LEDs heat up and we don't want them coming loose. And hot glue is a good way to secure that. All right, we got our sequence of LEDs all soldered up. You can see them here. And I have figured out a good number of LEDs that work. Also, you can see I'm using really dense LEDs. So I think what I've got is I've got 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 7, 7, 9, or something like that. That seems to work well. It's easier to solder this without it being in the box, and also because this is PLA, if you start trying to solder on top of this, you can melt it. So let's plug it in here, and fingers crossed. Just push this through here. All of these should be lighting up. There we go. Cool. All right. Now that we know all of our LEDs are working, let's start attaching inside of the box. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my glue gun, and I'm going to secure the board to the bottom right here. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue underneath it and just kind of press it in place there and hold it for a second. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some glue where the cord is exiting, so that if it gets pulled on for some reason, that it's not going to yank the connection out of the board, because that would be no good. face on here. Turn it on. There we go. That is pretty rad. But it can get better. Some packing foam. So I'm just going to kind of chuck this on top, and I'm going to cut. All right, got our foam diffuser attached. Realized I got hot glue strings. So I actually already noticed a big difference. It's not as, I don't know, you don't see as much of like the high reflectiveness inside of the whites, the clear areas. It's a lot more just blended. That's pretty cool. So it's like a rainbow fade. And we can adjust the speed of the fade. Yeah, psychedelic. Or you can make it real nice and slow and subtle. Okay, so if I pull this off again, just so we can see, here's what we have. I like to leave the faces removable so that they're serviceable. And when I designed the model, I designed it so that the tolerances are, I mean, they're tight enough, but it's not, you know, if you pick the thing up, the face, you know, if you, actually it stays in there pretty decently, but the face can pop out. All right, decided to super glue mine in. Notice this. Okay, something to be aware of. I used super glue and then I used some accelerator. It ate right through it. So we're seeing the undercoat there. It's all right. Like this kind of just adds to it, whatever. But yeah, that was surprising. So be careful if you're using super glue accelerator because it will go right through the finish here. Okay, so that was it. That was a lot of fun. I hope you learned something along the way and you've got yourself a really awesome Fallout sign that looks like it came right out of the wasteland.